Hey, what's up, CTA family? Welcome to the Compete Mentality Podcast. The Compete Mentality Podcast will bring to you basketball coaches, players, and trainers from all around the state of Indiana, country, and the world. The whole mission of the Compete Mentality Podcast is to motivate, educate, and inspire others to compete. Our definition of competing is doing what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard. No matter what area of life you are in, we are all called to compete. This podcast is brought to you by the Jordan Delks and Lewis Jackson Basketball School. Keep looking to our social media for future events and training sessions with the Jordan Delks and Lewis Jackson Basketball School. And now, without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce our today's guest, Grant Evans. Grant, thanks for joining the podcast today, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, JD. Anytime, obviously, I can connect with you. I look forward to. I woke up today and I was eating nails for breakfast. I saw I have Mr. Compete himself on the calendar. I was like, I got to go take my shoes off, walk around the woods in my backyard, chop a few trees down. I got to get my mind right if I'm talking.
Got to get your mind right. Got to get your mind right to compete. I love it. Same here, bro. I couldn't wait to hop on the pod with you today, and I'm excited for the discussion we're going to have. This is a special one for me, ladies and gentlemen. I got the privilege of coaching Grant for 2 years. We've stayed in touch since him coming to Indiana Wesleyan when I got to coach him there. And I just can't wait to see what God has in store for him. He's doing big things for the kingdom now and will continue to do so. And but really, Grant, to just kind of break the ice here, we train a lot of people. We really we pride ourselves in holistic training. So not just on the court, but the weight room, speed and agility, nutrition. And even though we focus a lot on nutrition, I love my food, bro. I love my food. So give us your go-to restaurant right now and describe what you're going to order.
Yeah. So that's a good one. And I listened to Whaley's podcast. And so he talked about that teriyaki steak that you and Courtney made one night. I think BP was over there too.
For sure.
And I'm telling you, if your listeners ever get a chance, if they're ever lucky enough, they got to go out and you got to make that for them. I promise you I'm not just saying it to say it. That's the best steak I've had. Better than Ruth Chris, better than St. Elmo's. So I'd say the Delks household's the best spot.
Hey, that's high praise.
But no, I think there's been a lot of places, especially during the pandemic, how we've had to order food and we can just try new things out. I've really tried to support a lot of local places. So I think the one that really comes to the top of my mind is just right down the road for me. So I'm back in Selma, Indiana, but Albany, Indiana, it's right up the road from me, about 10, 12 minutes, home of the Delta Eagles. But they got a place called Pete's Bar and Grill. So I wouldn't even call it a hole in the wall. I think it's known around here, but if you're in the area, you got to stop in there. Their selection's insane. They got a little bit of everything. You can get steak there. You can get fried chicken. But the thing that I get is called the Tyler Burger. So it's a beef patty, but you got mac and cheese, bacon. You throw their special fries in there, and that's definitely top of the line. So I'm gonna give some love to Pete's Bar and Grill there in Albany, Indiana.
Pete's Bar and Grill. I am definitely taking notes on that one. That's going to be a date night, Court. I know you're listening, so we're going to be going to Pete's Bar and Grill sometime. Man, I can't wait for that. I appreciate the shout out on the steak, man. That's high praise from you. So, Grant, give us your background. Give our listeners. I introduced you a little bit, but just give them your background, kind of how you got to where you are today, bro.
Yeah. So I think really you gotta go back to the early days. And so there's, obviously we could spend a whole podcast on probably all these different areas specifically. But for me, it started, the love of basketball was my first love. And it started at a young age. So how I was raised and the type of community I was raised in, I'm sure a lot of your listeners have watched or familiar with the movie Hoosiers. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's my life to a T. So my mom and dad, they had I was there till about second grade, but they had a yellow farmhouse out in the middle of the cornfield right off US 35. And in the backyard, there's 2 barns. So we had an adjustable goal. And really by the time I was 3 and 4, my dad, he just loved the game of basketball. He played a few years in high school, but he grew up in the 80s where it was, the NCC conference, when it was, the conference as we kind of know it as today. You have Muncie Central, Richmond, Marion, all these powerhouses coming to the Muncie Fieldhouse on Friday and Saturday night. And then obviously you have Bob Knight's IU teams. My dad's a huge IU fan. So winning the national championship in 81 and 87, he just had a love of the game that he shared with me at a young age. And so for me, it started kind of my love for basketball, which has been a big part of my life up and even till this day, just in the backyard. They're in Selma, Indiana, in the barn line. And we're doing drills at a young age. He's teaching me things at 3 and 4, like how to make a V cut or how to read screens. And especially, and that's a day and age where moving without the ball was so valued. And that's the Reggie Miller days where it wasn't so much off the bounce, but it was being able to make reads off a down screen, a pin down screen. So he was teaching me those things. I look back now, it's kind of crazy. My dad's always been a little bit on the crazier side, especially when it comes to basketball, but he was having me do those things at 3 and 4 years old. And really, I just developed a love for the game. Before I played competitively, like I just loved the game of basketball and was super passionate about it. And, you know, our weeks revolved around when does IU basketball play, and sit on his lap watching, you know, guys like Tom Coverdale, Jared Jeffries, Kurt Haston. And those are guys that probably, you know, people my age that are IU fans probably don't even know those names. But from a young age, we were watching those IU Hoosier teams. And so really just developed a love of a game at a young age. And then growing up, going through school. So I'm from Selma, Indiana. And if you don't know where that's at, it's a small town in Delaware County. It's, you know, Sweetser and Converse and Rossville. I'm sure I know you and Courtney can relate to it a lot, but it's the type of place where everybody knows everybody. And by the time you're in second grade, you got 80 classmates and you got four second grade classrooms, and you know everybody's first, last name, and probably their favorite color. So it was that type of environment growing up. And in second grade, you know, I really developed a lot of friends, and we started to just play basketball together. My class, we stayed together all throughout high school, and the class above me, we just played all throughout elementary school, and just really developed chemistry, but a friendship, and friendships that I still have till this day. And I think they ended up paying off later on in high school. But I kind of grew up in that community, and it was a thing where, you know, going through Perry Elementary and Selma Elementary, and being in the basketball state of Indiana, and just how passionate the fans are. Like we grew up, we didn't want to be LeBron James or James Harden. We wanted to be the guys that we were watching on Friday and Saturday night in Raider Gymnasium. So all we wanted to do was wear a Wapahani uniform. And so I think that's when basketball was at its purest form. I wanted to be guys like Todd Clark, Jeremy Hazelbaker, Matt Reese, guys that when I was in elementary school were coaching me on Saturday mornings. You know, those were the people I look up to. And as I got older, it was guys, you know, like a Drake Hendricks and stuff. So we went through all of elementary, and we just developed a really close friend group and a close bond, and went through middle school. And then obviously, you know, the time came to play high school basketball. We were fortunate enough, my class, we came in as freshmen, and we started 4 freshmen, and kind of set the tone for the next 3 years, and a lot of fun memories at Wapahani, playing in front of a sold out gym every single night. I mean, the town would shut down, we would travel, we'd have more fans at the away games than the home team would have. So it was just a cool experience to grow up first as just a fan of basketball, and to have a love of the game, but then to experience it how I experienced it, and how me and my friends were able to experience it together. I mean, those are guys I went to kindergarten with and stayed together through all those years. So had a great time. We had some team success at Wapahani, and then was fortunate enough, I know we'll kind of dive into it a little bit, the college, but was fortunate enough to play at Wright State in the Horizon League for a year, and then finished up my career at Indiana Wesleyan. So, you know, 3 really good years of my life. I took a lot of really good things away from it, from relationships and just people I'm still in contact with today. So that's it in terms of basketball. And then kind of where I'm at now, like the other IWU guys on here, I know I just listened to Jacob's and Bob's podcast, and it seems like everybody who graduates from Indiana Wesleyan and wore an IWU jersey, they get into finance. So, you know, we have that Charles Schwab connection. But I spent a few years at Edward Jones, and then just recently started up my own firm, doing financial planning. I'm back in Delaware County. I'm back in Selma. So based here, and just a lot of cool things. God's doing a lot of cool things in my life right now. And I'm truly blessed. I've had a really good life. And then also I know that I think that my best days are ahead of me. So I think that one thing, you know, kids can maybe get caught up in is those 4 years of high school basketball or college basketball, they look at those as the best years of their life. And hopefully, they realize one day the ball's going to stop bouncing and we're going to be called to do other things and make impact elsewhere. So, I think that I'm living in my best days now, and then I got the best days ahead of me. So it's kind of the long story short there to where I'm at today.
No, that's fantastic. That's an unbelievable testimony and story, and I can't wait to dive in and pick apart some specific areas of that story. But honestly, I actually completely forgot that you were an IU fan. And so with the IU vacancy now, I'm going to ask you right now, who's IU going to hire? Who do you want IU to hire?
I think every IU fan would love Brad Stevens. I don't know. I don't know if that'll get done. My dad was actually sending me some texts today with one of his press conferences. I think he's given some mixed emotions or mixed signals maybe. So he's playing with our heartstrings a little bit. And actually, there for a while, JD, I'm still an IU fan, really kind of always have been. But I had so many friends that just grown up with throughout the years who went on and played at Purdue or played at IU or played at different places. It's like, I didn't really root for IU so much, and I was just a fan of the game and followed my other teammates. But now, my dad and I were kind of getting back to, hey, it's Indiana basketball. So I'm going to throw a name out here that I don't think many people are probably saying, but Michael Lewis. I would love to see them get a Bob Knight guy in there. He's obviously had experience at Butler, obviously being in Jasper, Indiana. I'm a big Michael Lewis guy. He recruited me a little bit when he was at Butler. I think his personality would be really good for the fan base, and hopefully I think he'd be able to come in and do some special things. So probably a name that not many people are throwing around.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's interesting. That's a name I haven't heard yet from all the guys that I'm talking to that are IU fans. So that's a good one right there. That'd be a good one. So Grant, mentioning Michael Lewis recruited you, I want to dive into really your recruiting process. And you had an unbelievable high school career, Indiana All-Star, had lots of options. I'd love to hear. I actually watched a lot, evaluated. I'm sure they're still in the database at IWU where I evaluated you and gave you the TriQ rating. But tell us a little bit about your recruiting process and kind of how you got to where at first Wright State, then transferred in Wesleyan.
Yeah. So it started early. So obviously I can speak on my own and can probably maybe give a few things I wish I would have done a little bit differently for maybe the listener out there, maybe for some guys that haven't been recruited. But for me, I was fortunate to be recruited at a young age. And I think too, JD, let's define what recruiting is, because I think a lot of times guys get letters in the mail from colleges and they think, hey, this school is recruiting me or that school is recruiting me. In my mind, you're not getting recruited by a school until, you're on the phone with that head coach, or that head coach is in your gym, or you're taking unofficial visits. You might get a lot of letters, but you're just in their database.
Right.
So for me, it started at a young age. I mean, that was the time where James Blackman and Trey Lyles were offered in 8th grade by Tom Crean. And I don't know, you would know better than me. I think that's probably shifting a little bit. Guys are probably getting offered later on, but I had an offer from Wright State really before I even played a varsity basketball game. So we had some connections there, and they'd seen me play a few times in the summer before high school, and they came in the fall and, offered me a scholarship before, I even played a varsity minute. So for me, it started early, and I was fortunate to have a good freshman year. I mentioned I had a lot of really good teammates at Wapahani. Coach Luce was an awesome coach, and he was a big part of my success and just helping me through that process. But I was able to play early, and I had the ball in my hands early at Wapahani. So I had a pretty good freshman season, and then followed it up with a really good sectional. And I think at that time, the Indianapolis media and different things started picking it up. I mean, Indiana is such a crazy state where it's like high school basketball players are like celebrities, and you got people, full-time jobs writing blogs about Indiana high school basketball and recruiting. And so it's a little bit crazy and chaotic. So at 14, 15 years old, I was starting to get this recognition after my freshman season, and I was able to follow it up with a pretty good AAU season too. So we had some coaches calling me, and in contact before that AAU season that they were able to come and watch me in that spring and summer. And then it really kind of started to take off for me. So for me, it was early on, offer from Wright State University. I had a lot of mid-majors, a lot of them in the state of Indiana were reaching out to me. A lot of them in the Midwest were reaching out to me. But what was cool, and the thing that I took away from it now is the memories that were made from it. We had Tom Crean, in Wapahani's gym. We had, Coach Greg Gary at Purdue, Brad Stevens, Michael Lewis, Coach Beeline in Michigan. I took multiple visits to all those places. And like I said, in kind of at 14 and 15, it's really a whirlwind.
Yeah.
It kind of came around full circle when I told you my dad's a big IU fan. And so he's sitting there talking about when I'm a kid, dialing up Peegs when we had dial-up internet and looking at their recruiting message board, telling me, hey, such and such recruit was on a golf cart visit at Indiana, they're saying. And so we had, Tom Crean in the golf cart and my dad in the front seat and me and Calvert Chaney in the back seat. And so it kind of came full circle, like, hey, this is me now. And so I think the thing that I would say to your guys that are getting recruited, like, one, enjoy that moment. And at the time, it might seem like a lot. And I'm sure there's a lot of different questions that you do need to be asking, and surround yourself with the right people, but enjoy that moment with your family and kind of take that in, because definitely later on in life, I've been able to look back and say, hey, those are some cool times. So I was recruited by pretty much anybody and everybody, especially at a young age. I think they're still trying to figure out what level you're going to fall in, where you're going to end up at. And so that continued really into my sophomore year, and had a handful of Division I offers, and we'll get into the Indiana Wesleyan stuff, but I remember not even thinking about NAIA basketball at the time. Like, for me, it was probably mid-major or for the right fit, potentially, if one of these Big Ten schools stick around. Yep. For the right fit, maybe it's one of those schools. But played summer AAU, played in front of all those colleges, went to all those elite camps. And really, though, I committed early. So Wright State was the first to offer. And after going into my junior year in the summer before the evaluation period, I went ahead and committed to Wright State. I think we kind of knew at the time, hey, Big Ten's not the level I'm going to be at. Wright State stuck around the longest. At the time, Ball State was transitioning to a new staff, and it was like, Wright State's an hour and 15 minutes away. We're familiar with their coaches. We're comfortable with their coaches. It's a good program. Butler had just had success in the Horizon League, going to the national championship 2 years in a row. And if you look, Wright State was second in all those years. So I thought, hey, I'm going to a great program where I'm going to have a chance to play, but then also to play in the NCAA tournament. That's kind of what I wanted. So my recruiting process, it took off like a rocket ship, and then we kind of ended it early. So I was done with it by the time my junior year rolled around, which was kind of nice to then just be able to focus on high school basketball and focus on, what my high school team was doing.
Absolutely. Man, those are some cool stories. I didn't know about you riding on a golf cart with Calvert Chaney. And I think that's really wise advice. I think I'm training a lot of high school guys that would kill to have the recruiting process that you did. So that's a fantastic story. And really, I want to kind of transition to your time at Indiana Wesleyan, playing specifically in the Crossroads League after playing Division I basketball. Was the competition in the Crossroads League even with that? Was it, just tell us about the competition. Was it a surprise to you? What would you say?
Yeah, it was 100% a surprise. So I'll start off by saying that. If we look at the different levels, the biggest difference is the athleticism from the Horizon League to the Crossroads League, but the skill levels on par or better at the Crossroads League. And so this is where I kind of came in, and I was really kind of I guess naive in the whole process. I came in to Indiana Wesleyan after my 1 year at Wright State, and thought I was going to come in and be the man. I thought it was going to be easy. Here I was. I had all this success in my past, and I thought it was going to be easy to transition over. And that wasn't the case at all, because there's really good players at Indiana Wesleyan. And so, those 2 years I had at Indiana Wesleyan, they were great years. We had a lot of team success. I played on a lot of talented teams and just made a lot of good memories. But I think the thing that I would say, maybe to your listeners, something that I wish I would have had is someone to kind of guide me or help me talk through that first year of college basketball. Someone, I think, like you, who's had experience. You see a lot of freshmen go in and their expectations are up here because they've had a lot of success in the past, and you're the man for 4 years, and you go into a place where all of a sudden you're the bottom guy and you got to earn your minutes, you got to earn your time. I think that even kind of transitioned over to my time at Indiana Wesleyan. I thought, hey, this is going to be a lot easier. It's the NAIA. I never even thought about playing in the NAIA in the past, but I didn't realize at the time how good of basketball and the level of basketball at that level is, and especially in the Crossroads League, and then especially at Indiana Wesleyan, where I think they're kind of a notch above everybody. You look at the success they've had. just a lot of talented guys in that league, and a lot of guys that fall through the cracks, and a lot of guys that could have ended up at a mid major, or even some guys at a high major, but for whatever reason it wasn't the right fit, and they chose to play in the Crossroads League, and it makes for competitive, fun basketball, and it doesn't get any easier.
Absolutely. And I'm a little partial to the Crossroads League, having coached Indian Wesleyan for 2 years and playing small college basketball. And I have players on this podcast that play Division I in the Big Ten. And I love what you said, that the skill set is as good or better. And I would agree with that. I think basketball is basketball, and it doesn't matter. The biggest difference would definitely be the athleticism at a high major program for sure, but the skill set at the small college level is just unbelievable. So young person, if you're working on your game right now, okay, you've got to take your game to the next level, get with a trainer like Grant was saying. That's something that I really pride myself in, is helping you kind of guide through that recruiting process. Just like Grant was saying, he wished he would have had somebody guide him through that freshman year, helping him understand really that there's players everywhere, and that there's a lot of good schools everywhere that can offer you full ride scholarships. So, but what a cool story, Grant. And I want to know, like, you had an unbelievable college basketball career. Just fun times. You're a sniper. And tell us two things that you really loved about playing college basketball specifically.
Yeah. And thinking about this before, it's hard to kind of narrow it down to two things. I think the first thing that goes, and it's probably been said on this podcast before, but one, the relationships that you build. So, whether it was at Wright State, I enjoyed my year at Wright State, and it was a tough year, and I'm appreciative of that staff and for what, how they helped me grow in the game of basketball, but also for the guys in that locker room. It was such a fun locker room to be a part of. And guys I still talk to this day. And then he transitioned to Indiana Wesleyan, where I got some of my best friends for life who were a part of, those 2 years at IWU, and I talk to daily, Bob Peters, Jacob Johnson, Johnny Marlin, guys that just come to the top of my head. It's those relationships. And then also you get to Indiana Wesleyan, and what's unique about Indiana Wesleyan is it's so much more than basketball. So Tonigal, Clark, Whaley, you guys still reach out to me. I probably don't go a month without at least one of you reaching out to me. And that's such a cool thing, because it's going on 4 or 5 years now since I last put on an IWU jersey. Right. And so for to have a staff there, that one, obviously winning was important at Indiana Wesleyan, and that's the standard there, and it's unacceptable to lose, and you're going to go there and you're going to win. But also what's more important is you're going to go and you're going to be forced to grow as a person. But then when you leave Indiana Wesleyan, you still got people checking in on you. You still got people pouring into you. So I think the biggest thing first would just be those relationships. And with JD, it's just the times in the locker room. It's the time on the bus. It's the time in the dorm room. It's basketball, such a small part of the college experience. It's a big part of it if you're fortunate enough to play. But really, it's the guys that you're with on a day-to-day basis, going to class with, and just sharing moments with. Outside of basketball, where really a lot of those memories are made, and then it just makes it even better that you get to compete with them every day in practice, and then go to war with them. Especially in the Crossroads League, you're playing against guys who were great high school players in Indiana and across the Midwest, and you're going up against those guys every night, but you're doing it with your best friends and guys that you're going through life with. So one, it's the relationships. Two, I would say how hard it is, and I think that it's so. I don't know if kids and high school kids realize how hard it is to play college basketball. And looking back now, I'm thankful for how hard it was because how it prepared me for life. But a lot of people say they love the game, and I think it's easy to talk about the schedule. You talk about waking up at 5 a.m. to be at weights at 5:45. You have a 7:50 class, maybe a 9:50 class, maybe quick bite to eat for lunch, individual workouts and practice, and then you're off to another class and study tables. You're wrapping your day up at 10 o'clock at night. And so to do that day in and day out, again, it's easy to say that, but actually think about doing that 5 days a week, and think about that grind. And one, how hard it is during the moment, but two, how well it prepares you for life after basketball. And when you're ready to step into the workforce or go on to whatever you're going to do next. That was the best thing, and the thing that I appreciate most about college basketball was just the grind of it and how it prepared me for life after basketball.
Grant, as you're giving that testimony, I think of two things. First, James 1:2-4 comes to mind. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And I love how you embraced the grind, that you embraced the hardships of college basketball, and it made you into the man you are today. And so, players listening, you got to embrace the grind. You got to embrace those hard times, because it's going to make you into the person God wants you to be. And secondly, I love how you pointed out relationships. That's really what it's all about, and developing that brotherhood. And I recently had one of your boys on here, Bob Peters, and give me a story about BP, man. Like he's one of the, you two are, you guys are my guys, man. You guys are hilarious. I love you guys. Give me a story about BP, man.
One, I heard BP's podcast today, so I got beef with them. So one, Bob, it's like that old Toby Keith song. I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. Like, I'm still a little bit crazy enough to show up at your doorstep today and get you in a headlock, just like I did in the dorm room back at IWU. So like, I'm not going to sit here and make jokes about how I don't think you could probably walk a mile without having to take a 10 or 15 second break in between each lap. Like, I'm not going to sit here and do that now. I don't know what you've done since college athletics. Like, I'll be nice to you, but I want you to know that I'm still a little bit crazy enough to maybe show up at your doorstep today. But no, I can say that because Bob's my best friend. I talk to Bob daily. So Bob's a great guy, and then obviously JJ's podcast. Obviously, your listeners need to go check those things out. One thing I'll say that JJ said, JD, that I was scratching my head, is Kyle Mangus is debatably the greatest basketball player to ever wear an Indiana Wesleyan uniform. And I'm like, who else is in that conversation with him?
I'm with you there. I'm with you there.
What more does he need to do to be up on the pedestal above everybody else?
I love Kyle, and there ain't no debate.
So JJ said he was waking up at 5 a.m. to get to a 6 o'clock junkyard. That's a lie. So JJ was my roommate.
Yeah.
And in the first year at Indiana Wesleyan, not to get too much off on a tangent, but like JJ's in my ear about these junkyards. And it's June. We're there in June. These junkyard workouts are the hardest thing he's ever done. I'm like, dude, like I just played Division I basketball for a year. I'm sure it's gonna be nothing. And I get a little worried when his alarm goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning to chug a protein shake and eat a granola bar. And so I'm like, I look at my phone and he's up like scrambling around, and JJ, that's exactly who he is.
Yep.
And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And he's like, you better be putting something in your stomach now because you don't know what's coming at 6 a.m. He's like, I'm just getting ready for it. I'm like, man, this guy is crazy. But JJ's another one of those guys where if I need anything right now, he's one of the first people I call, and he'll be there for me. So those are just two guys that still have a good relationship with today, and so thankful that I ended up at Indiana Wesleyan. For guys like that, it's so much more than basketball with them, and those are guys I'm doing life with, daily. So two great men, love them to death, and so they know, they probably expect me to give them a little bit of a hard time.
For sure. I love it. I absolutely love all three of you guys, and stay in touch with all three of you guys on a regular basis. So those are great. Those are great, and definitely no debate. Definitely no debate on Kyle Mangus. Definitely no.
Yeah.
So. Competing is doing what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard. That's how we define competing. A lot of people define competing in different ways. They base success off of wins or other types of success. We base success off competing and doing what God calls you to do, even when it's hard. Give us an example of a time in your life where you really had to compete.
Yeah. I mean, I've been lucky, JD. Like, I've lived a life where it's been, compared to most people, it's been sunshine and rainbows, and I'm aware of that, and I'm thankful for that. So I realize that I've been lucky. I think it was probably really up until this past year where really me and my family probably experienced some real adversity. To kind of let you know, in November, December, my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer. Fast forward now, to not leave too much suspense. Hey, surgery took care of everything, no treatment. Like, he's doing better than he has been the last couple of years. So he's good now. But at the time, we didn't really know the signals we were getting from the doctor. It didn't sound like it was the best. So your mind immediately goes to kind of the worst case scenario. Is it stage 3? Is it stage 4? Is he going to be told he's got X amount of months to live, or whatever the case is? And so you're kind of thinking that mentally. So for 2 or 3 weeks, we didn't really know. You're also going through COVID during that time. And my dad's the guy where he can't drive through a drive-through without getting stressed out. And now he's got to walk into, the emergency room by himself. My mom can't go in there to prepare for this surgery. And so it was definitely a tough time in my life. At the same time, before my mom and dad, and the same day they went to find out my dad had colon cancer, my mom got a call at school from her brother, and my younger cousin, who was in Missouri, passed away in a car accident. So he's younger than me, and it was unexpected. And so it's kind of all happened on this same day. So that's kind of November, December going on. But what I got to tell you about is the months that were leading up to it. And so I've been fortunate, JD, that throughout my entire life, I was raised in a Christian home. So I've always had godly men around me, godly men who were older than me pouring into me. Guys like Kevin Thomas, Dan Kaufman, and Pastor Jim Ballinger, 3 people that I've always poured into me. But Johnny Marlin, back in August, we started just spending one-on-one time together. We went through the book of Acts. We read Radical by David Platt. We read Francis Chan. So I was experiencing this time of growth with God. And I got to thank Johnny for that, to really spark that in me and spend intentional time with me in a one-on-one setting to really prepare me for this moment that I was about to face. So I look back, and God's timing with everything's just incredible. Yeah. So during this time, my dad gets diagnosed with colon cancer, and we find out about my cousin, a guy I mentioned, Kevin Thomas. He's one of my best friends' dad. He's leading a Bible study with a group of my friends around my age over the book of Daniel. So it's my first time going through the book of Daniel in detail and really understanding that. And then I hear a sermon specifically about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they get thrown into the fire. And the thing that gave me comfort in that time, and a time where it was probably the most I've gone through, a time where if I wasn't with Jesus or walking with Jesus at that time, I can't imagine how I would have handled the situation. But the thing that gave me comfort in the picture that it's in my head and still gives me chills now, it's like those 3 dudes were thrown in the fire, but there was a 4th person in the fire with them. And so kind of going through the book of Daniel and then hearing that sermon, it allowed me to really just take a step away from the situation and realize that, one, I'm not in control of what's going on. Like, God's in control of that. And that's where I find my peace. And so I was good with whatever's going to happen. Obviously I had my plans of what I wanted God to do, and he ended up answering so many prayers in major ways. But I had to be okay with, what if he doesn't? Like, what if he doesn't, come out on the end of this, and we have to go through, certain things as a family? Like, what does that look like? And I had a calming peace about it because of, one, Johnny's sparked some time of spiritual growth in my life, but 2, I have people pouring into me, and just, it was a time that I was walking with God during that midst of my life. So blessed to just be around some really good people that pour into me. And I think now kind of what me and a couple of my friends are looking at now, we look at it, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they stood up to worldly things at the time. They didn't eat certain foods. They didn't bow down to certain statues. And because of that, they were put into the fire. I think there's a lot that we're going through now as a world and a society. If you're a high school kid nowadays, I think it's harder to be a high school kid nowadays than it was 10 years ago when I was in high school. I think it's hard to be a young adult. I think it's probably hard to be a man raising, 2 kids and has a wife. I think at every spot in our life, just with so many voices that we allow to have access to us, whether that's social media, Instagram, Snapchat, or Fox News or CNN, we have all these outside voices that are really impacting us. And I think it's up to us to take a look at what we're being fed and say, is this a worldly thing or is this a godly thing? And if it's a worldly thing, we need to stand up to it. We need to call it out, call it how it is, and we need to pursue God and walk with God. So I think the biggest theme for me these past couple months, JD, is, one, seek God out of love. Like, it's got to be out of love, and it can't be because you're telling somebody to, or I'm telling you to do it. Like, you got to do it because you want to do it. I think if you do that, God's going to put some things on your heart, whether that's things you need to change as an individual, whether that's deciding to disciple other people, as we're called to be disciples. God's going to put some things on your heart, and I think it's important to be obedient to those things, even when it's what you don't want it to do, even if it's not something you want to do. But when you are obedient, just watch how God works. Sit back and watch how God works in your life. And I think, God's moved in so many ways in my life these past few months, and I have a lot of people to thank for it. But like, we serve such an awesome and powerful God, and he wants us to do good things, and he wants us to have success. And it's like, we just got to pursue him out of love and be obedient to his calling, and just sit back and watch him work. So it's kind of what's been going on in my life, and kind of just what I've been experiencing lately. So I'm thankful for the people I had in my life to push me, to prepare me for what, that news with my dad, and to go through that time with my family. If I wasn't going through a time of growth, I don't know how I would have handled it.
Evs, man, I can hear the passion in your voice the whole time, and you're giving me chills. And I'm typing notes on a Word document of takeaways from that testimony right there, man. Thank you so much for encouraging all our listeners and me big time by sharing that testimony. That was fantastic. That is a mic drop. Thank you so much, man. And as we kind of wrap up this podcast, give our listeners something God is teaching you right now in this moment of life you are in.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to be obedient to his calling. So God's timing it might not align with ours, and even what God's plan is, it might not align with our plan. But if we trust what God is doing in our life, and if we're consistently pursuing God, it's not to say that life's always going to be easy, because it won't. But at the end goal in mind, and where we'll end up, it's going to be such a better place than what's happening right here on this earth. And so, just being obedient to God, pursuing God out of love, and he's just teaching me that, hey, your obedience to me, you're going to be rewarded for that in the end. And it might not be even here on my time on earth, but eventually it's going to be, my forever home, which is heaven. So.
Absolutely, man. Grant, that's such a good message for all of us to grab onto, for all of us to really take to heart. And man, I just can't thank you enough for the time you spent with us today. All the stories, all the life lessons, your testimony, and there's so much that we can all take from this and apply it to our lives, and grow not only as basketball players, as coaches, but as children of God as well. So thank you so much. That means a lot.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate what you and Courtney are doing. I know we talked about it a little bit before, but if you have a chance to get in with them, you got to do it, because one, I think they're doing it the right way, and I think it's an industry that's kind of a little cloudy and murky right now. But you're going to get taught to compete. You're going to get taught to play basketball and play the right way, which I think is important nowadays. But also, you're going to get so much more than that. Spending time with JD and Courtney, you're going to get poured into. You're going to be challenged. So I know that one day, if I have kids, I promise you, I'm making that drive at least once a week, just because the culture that you build up there in Grant County. So you're not too far from me. So if you're still doing it in a couple of years, I definitely want my kids to be part of that.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot, and we'll hook you up for sure. And we need to make that drive here soon, where you can come visit. We can kick it and tell some stories, and just learn from each other, man. I grow. Iron sharpens iron. I grow from you just as much as you do from me, and I appreciate your impact on my life as well, bro. CTA family, thank you for listening to this podcast. Always remember that competing is doing what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard.